Hello, and welcome to the third annual Friendsgiving podcast spectacular. My name is Kenny Ryan. I am the host of the Abridged Presidential Histories podcast, and I am joined by three friends. And today we're going to do a roundtable of questions for each other and what we're thankful for as we head into Thanksgiving. So other people joining me today, we have Jerry Landry of the Presidencies podcast. Jerry, say hello.
Hello, everyone. So glad you're here joining us for this, what has become now a tradition. And I know for me, I can already say I'm thankful for this tradition. It's always a pleasure to talk with all of you.
It's always good to have you here, Jerry. We've also got Howard from Plotting Through the Presidencies. Hey, Howard.
Hello. Yeah, pleasure to be here, as always. And yeah, I second Jerry's sentiments. It's great to reconvene with this group.
Fantastic. We got Alicia from Civics and Coffee Pod. Hey, Alicia.
Hey. And at the risk of being repetitive, I too am very happy that this has turned into a tradition. And I always enjoy speaking with you fine gents. So I'm happy to be here.
Future Kenny here. At the top of the episode, we're going to talk about our feelings on and reaction to the recent presidential election. If you would like to skip that and go straight to the fun stuff, jump to 8 minutes and 10 seconds. That's 8 minutes, 10 seconds. See you there in your future. Fantastic. So let's start. We in past years, we've recorded this in September. This year, we made the wonderful decision to record this after the election so we could really, truly talk about what we're thankful for this year. And how are people doing? Silence. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, I'm thankful for. I have a new daughter. I'm thankful for that. And that's where my attention is this year. I brought her on a minute before this started, introduced her to everybody. She's a little joy. And so I've got that to, put my focus in. It was certainly I think, an unexpected election result for many of our listeners and for many people around the country. And so we're recording in, the after of that. And I think a lot of people are still, this was 5 days ago that the election was. I think a lot of people are still sitting in their feelings about it. I don't know about y'all, but I have had a lot of friends who have just been kind of very quiet since Tuesday.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And I think for all of us being able to speak to this with historical perspective in mind, it's a blessing and also a curse that we are so connected, that communication is what it is now. We've been immersed in this election process for the better part of 2 years now. I mean, really kind of 4, but 2 years, very intense. And there are a great deal of emotions in this. It, like Kenny said, it wasn't necessarily what folks were thinking was going to happen. And we're still processing, and it's going to take time, and that's okay. We've got to feel the feelings that we're feeling and move forward from there. And that's sometimes all we can do is do the best we can to move forward, but everybody's not there yet, and that's okay.
I'm disappointed, I think is the best word I can use to describe. I'm also fearful because I am somebody whose day job is on the line. If this administration does half of what it says it's going to do, I work in social services. I work in the social safety net programs, and specifically in Medicaid. So the idea that they want to repeal the ACA, which came pretty close during his first administration, and those guardrails are not in place this time. He will have the Senate. It is increasingly looking like he will have the House, or have a pretty big share of the House to make legislative policies. So I have a lot of anxiety around my economic welfare. I have a lot of anxiety about what this means for the fellow humans in my life. I have people who are undergoing cancer treatment. What does that look like if we're not funding our sciences? So, yeah, I'm disappointed that this is where we are at. And history, I was saying before we press record, being a historian in this moment doesn't make me happy, doesn't make me excited, doesn't make me positive about the future. I have a very cynical view of what we're about to go through. And that is a scary feeling to have.
Yeah. I mean, it may sound disingenuous, it may sound cliche, but the people's power to fight, no matter, what they believe in or who's in charge or what, through protests, through making people more informed about the consequences of what certain legislation might do, that's still around. That's something we still have. And the social media landscape might be terrible for the world, but it does let the power of one voice sometimes come through in ways that can make a difference in the way that the people of a even certain state might be able to influence senators to vote. So, yeah, I can't say that I'm encouraged by that, but I think that as exhausted as people might be, that fight needs to continue, because that really is, people, are the greatest check and balance on our government. And you can't just lay down ever. It's exhausting. But yeah, that's all I can think, is that there are a lot of people that are still going to be fighting for what they believe in. And that doesn't change. It makes it a hell of a lot harder. And yeah, that's how I see the next several years going. And I'm, also depressed that there's not going to be a pet in the White House again, as a much smaller, inconsequential thing. Even if they were biting Secret Service agents, you still had that presence there. So,
yeah, it's kind of funny, because on my podcast, I try to be as down the middle as I can be when I'm telling these stories. Outside of my podcast, definitely disappointed in the election. There, for all the reasons y'all have said, and I have friends who are immigrants with status that puts them in peril right now. And so for those people, for any listeners who are nervous about the future, we feel you. And the one bit of context we hope we get from history is that it's never over. It never, as you can despair, but there's always some fight in there. You never know what's going to happen. So we'll see what comes. But I'm certainly surprised that we held a national contest to see who we would all do future episodes on, and that nobody wanted a future episode on Kamala, or not enough people did, and so we'll get another future episode on Trump. So let me jump into our questions. So enough about the election. Let's jump into questions that we wrote before the election result.
Woo.
And let's have some fun. So, Jerry, if you could magically interview any current or former U.S. president, who would you interview, and what would the topic of your interview be?
Oh, gosh. And as somebody who loves presidential history, naturally, it's most of them. But, and I do use the qualifier most. There are a few that, we can just skip that interview.
Everyone but you, Fillmore. You know what you did.
But I'd honestly have to say LBJ. Lyndon Baines Johnson, just because he is just such a fascinating figure, and he's so complicated. He is this person who pushed for programs to combat poverty, to be able to meet social concerns. But he's also the president who oversaw Vietnam and the expansion of that conflict. He's a person who was gruff and who was abrasive and who cursed like a sailor and said a lot of words that really shouldn't have been said, and had some complicated thoughts and views on certain segments of the population. And I just love a chance to try to ask him some questions and understand how does this all fit together in one person.
That's a good one. I love me some LBJ. Fascinating guy.
I mean, if nothing else, it's definitely going to be something to watch. So, for better or worse. Well, thank you so much for that question, Kenny. And so I will return the favor to Alicia. Alicia, has there been a historical figure, event, or topic that you had planned to cover, but for whatever reason, you put the plans for that episode aside? And if so, what happened? But if not, is there one that you've just had in mind to cover for a while, but just haven't gotten around to yet?
The answer to both of those questions is yes. Very early on in my podcasting journey, I got a request to cover a man named James Ready or Reedy. I don't know exactly if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But basically, he was the first U.S. consulate to New Zealand. And there is very, 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 very scant information available about him, unless it's on some, random esoteric textbook that I'm just not going to spend $900 to buy. So he's one that I've had to say, so sorry, but he's just a very, a very small figure in history, and there just hasn't been enough that I can access to share that story.
So information is not readily.
Information's definitely not. He doesn't even have like a Wikipedia page, I think. I mean, I searched everywhere.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah, that's like nobody cares, and I feel bad, but like I'm like I can't make information that's not there, and I don't have access to the New Zealand archives, right? So I wish I did, but I don't.
I'm imagining all of a sudden like an entire wing of the New Zealand archive about that. They're waiting for somebody to come and visit.
Exactly.
You're not just going to jet over to New Zealand tomorrow? Come on.
Over the recent days, maybe, but no. And then, I know I have a long list of topics and people and events that I definitely want to cover. I'm knee deep in Reconstruction right now. And as everybody here knows, and as hopefully most of my listeners have figured out by now, is I do primarily a chronological format. I intersperse it here and there with interviews and listener requests. But for the most part, it's chronological. So there's plenty of things to come. I'm looking forward to diving into Mary Church Terrell. I'm looking forward to looking into the Ford Hunger March, the Supreme Court case U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark. I think that story will become much more timely in the next several years than people maybe anticipate. So I have so many things to get to, and I just keep researching. So yes.
Fantastic for your listeners.
We look forward to all the episodes that you've got to come, and hope that you're able to find sources to speak more to them, because that is always one of the most frustrating things when you get a topic or a person. And I know I've had some seat at the table folks that it's been like, there's got to be something out there about this person. And it can be a challenge when you just can't find the right sources or any sources.
Yep, I agree. Okay, so my question is for Howard.
All right.
You dedicate your episodes to the strange and unbelievable aspects of presidential history. What has been the weirdest aspect of the recent election that you foresee covering in the future?
Okay, I don't know that I'll cover this in the future, but I have a huge interest in myths, debunking them, researching their origins, understanding their appeal. And this election had a lot of disinformation, and some of it was ugly, like Haitians eating pets, just came from a really dark place. But my favorite piece of disinformation, because it's just so absurd, it has to be JD Vance and the couch fucking. It all came from one dude's tweet,
right?
Who cited in parentheses JD Vance's book and the page numbers plural, as if this was a scene that took place over several pages, and that made it so believable for so many people. And it was absurd. Yet somehow a lot of people saw it. And with that citation, I think it just took off. And it became so widespread that the Associated Press published a fact check saying, no, J.D. Vance did not have sex with a couch, because there was no reference in the book. And I love the way that they checked was just basically using like a Kindle version of the book and searching for some keywords. That's the first way I would check, because they couldn't be bothered to actually read the book. Like that wasn't going to happen. They're just, we didn't see anything. But then they unpublished that fact check because it wasn't up to their journalistic standards, which I love, because then it gave people the chance to falsely claim that they unpublished it because they could not confirm that J.D. Vance never had sex with a couch. So yeah,
I mean, it's true. They can't confirm that,
right?
But they can confirm that he did not write about.
Well, yeah, but then there was a galley copy of the book where, there's so many stories that came out. But I don't know, in the abyss of disinformation that had probably very real consequences, that's one truly weird story that I'm never going to forget.
Well, I look forward to that episode in the next few years.
In about 15, 16 years when we get there, as we plod slowly through, we'll see.
You need to find a couch sponsor for that episode.
Wow.
Brought to you by Lazy Boy.
Yeah.
If you're going to sleep with a couch, sleep with a Lazy Boy.
Yeah. Yeah. You've heard of Ashley Madison. Have you heard of Ashley Furniture? No.
Hey!
No.
Our couch matchmaking service will find the right couch for you.
Wow. Okay, so let's turn it around. So Kenny, as you've moved like chronologically through the presidents, which the name of my podcast makes it sound like I do, which really I should be called John Adams's world, but that's neither here nor there. As you move through them and learned more and more, has your opinion changed on some presidents that you covered earlier? And is there anything that you would change about earlier episodes because of that?
It's a good question. Thanks, Howard.
You're welcome.
I think the president who my opinion changed the most on is George Washington. And it's not necessarily that my understanding of what he did or didn't do has changed, or I think he's like, oh, I thought this was a bad idea, now I think it's a good idea. But it's more of, he was the first person I read about. And so he was kind of like the initial bar. And I'm like, okay, who's going to be better or worse? Like, if people say, is he really all that great? And so as I keep reading presidents after him, I'm like, that person's not as good as George. That person's not as good as George. That person's not as good as George. And you at the end, as we catch up 1 times, I'm like, he really is one of the best presidents. And the accomplishments, the way he listened to diverse opinions, the way he had a very steady foreign policy at a time when the United States was very vulnerable. You recognize that there was a lot of wisdom in those actions that at the time you really like, yeah, these are all smart ideas. And then you find out that later presidents weren't that smart. And he really does just start to shine more when put next to most of the rest. So he would be someone who my opinion has changed in that way. And if there's anything I would change about earlier episodes, I don't know if there's anything I would change about earlier episodes because of that, except that I would love to. I think it was maybe 16 presidents in I started interviewing historians. And so I would love to go back and interview some historians who specialize on George Washington and some of those early other presidents and dive more into it. I've had some interviews with Lindsay Chervinsky about Washington and Adams, and those were great conversations. I love to talk to some more people to get more perspective on that world. It's fascinating and it's relevant to today, sometimes more than you might expect. So that's my answer to that question. Yeah. Thanks, Howard. All right. My next question, I got one for Alicia. Alicia,
yes, sir.
You and Jerry recently appeared on the final episode of Totalis Rankium Presidents. the President's Podcast, where you two debated about who was the best president in U.S. history, Lincoln or FDR. And I'm not going to spoil who won that debate, except to say I am never hiring Jerry to represent me in court. On the flip side, who do you think is the worst president in U.S. history and why?
I will answer this as a historian and really discount anybody who's held office in the last 50 years because I feel like we don't have enough perspective on many of their administrations. So I'm answering it with that kind of a caveat. However, I think that will change in 50 or so years. But for the sake of the conversation today, I will go with Andrew Johnson, probably because he's right in my face with Reconstruction and his failures of really implementing a interracial democracy. I think we had a wonderful once-in-a-lifetime type of opportunity in the immediacy after the Civil War. And I think he was just completely unable and constitutionally incapable of meeting that moment. He had too many personal flaws. He was too self-important, too committed to the white man's government to really understand the value of having more voices at the table. And you just think of all of the things that he either failed to support or tried to veto or ended prematurely, like the Freedmen's Bureau, right? That was an agency that was really instituted to help newly emancipated Black Americans get into society and figure out labor contracts and how to find their lost loved ones. And for the various earliest portions, get some access to land so that they could be self-sufficient. His attempted veto of the Reconstruction Acts, his attempted veto of many other acts that, are brushed with these radical title, which if you read them, they're not actually all that radical. And so it really helped permeate and make permanent things like Jim Crow, segregation, this idea that the color of your skin kind of dictated what your competency level was, even though we had, even in those first few years after the Civil War, we had all of these wonderful examples of men who were capable and just happened to be Black. And so I think in this moment, trying to speak historically, I will pick Andrew Johnson.
That is a solid pick for shitty president.
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of a jerk. So, okay. So while we're talking about presidents, I'll go to the guy who does the deepest dives ever. And I'm going to ask this question knowing full well, like, what I've already put on your plate in previous Friendsgiving episodes. But you recently traveled overseas where you still managed to find ties to American presidential history because you're some savant when it comes to that, I think. Have you ever considered launching a historical travel series a la Rick Steves?
It would be really fun to do. I'm hoping that someday when I can figure out how to get those podcasting millions rolling in, I'll be able to do that, but it is fun. And that's one thing that I've tried to do with recent travel the last few years. In some places it's easier than others. It helps that the 20th and early 21st century presidents traveled extensively. And so if you're going somewhere, and especially like European capitals, it's easy to find some connection. Some places you can even go further. Like when I went to Paris and was able to see sites where Jefferson was and Adams, and it was just amazing. But it's also one of those things, it can get frustrating as well. So Paris, we went to the Père Lachaise cemetery where there are numerous prominent Americans buried there. And one of the surprising ones is I was researching like who all was there. Judah P. Benjamin came up. And for our listeners who may not be familiar with him, he ended up in the Confederate government. He was the Confederate Secretary of State. And so after the Civil War, he ended up in Paris. And that's where he remains to this day, or at least his remains. And I was like, okay, this is just such an obscure character. Of course, I've got to search for where he's buried. And we ended up searching, and my poor husband, bless him, we were searching for like 40 minutes. We never really found him. We finally decided, you know what, he's somewhere in this general area. That's enough. But likewise, when we were in Vienna, and I forget which summit it was, there was a summit that was held there, but I could never find anything. And it was actually, it was George W. Bush had held a summit there, but I could never find something that said exactly where it was held. I was like, that's too recent that we don't know where it's at. But I was like, we're just going to say it was here. We're just going to say it was here. But it is so fun. It's a good way to be able to share travels with listeners and followers on social media, to be able to connect them with what's going on with me and to have that connection, and hopefully encourage other folks to visit historic sites. For anybody who isn't aware, there is a podcast called Visiting the Presidents that goes through the birthplaces, goes through their primary houses. And I think right now his third season is on, where they're buried, but he basically does that. So he saved me from having to do that. But it is fascinating because I do love that connection to places. And, I recently had Kurt Dion from the Congressional Cemetery, and Howard, I know he appeared on your podcast as well. And we were talking about Congressional Cemetery. And again, it's one of those places that it's great to have that connection, to be able to really feel that you're standing in the midst of history. So I do always encourage folks, visit historic sites. It helps all that we study, all that we hear about on podcasts, read in books. It helps to remind us that these were real people in real places.
Mm-hmm. I want to just tell a quick little story. You mentioned the Confederate in Paris. That reminds me of a crazy story that Alicia or Howard might enjoy diving into someday. When reading about Jimmy Carter, there was one time where he visited South America, and he visited a town in South America that was basically the old Confederate South. So, the old, line, I'm fleeing to Canada because I don't like these election results. Well, after the Civil War, a bunch of Southerners, they fled because they didn't want to be in this country anymore. And they went to the specific town in South America, and there's a town where they serve old Southern food. They dress as old Southern dress people do. And Carter went down there and he was like, I felt like I was in Georgia. This is weird. So, Yeah, you talk about weird things you'll see in history. That might be a fun thing for someone to dig into at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay, I'm going to have to research that now.
Road trip.
So, Howard, now, as you said, of course, we know that you love all things Adams's, and you provide such a wealth of information on, not just John and John Quincy. You really start to help us to understand even more about this political family. But outside of the Adamses, I was wondering, who has been your favorite figure in U.S. presidential history to research thus far, and who is someone that you're excited about researching in the future?
Yeah. I do love me some Adamses. It's true. So founding era, it's got to be Aaron Burr, because he's just so full of surprises. You want to hate him, but then, we did this episode on his charisma, the undeniable rays of Aaron Burr. And it's so fascinating just how damn good of a statesman he could be. It's such a complex guy. But as for who I've really enjoyed, and it's the same person because I've studied them a bit, want to study them more, I'm going to have to go with Major Archibald Butt. He was the military aide, basically the chief of staff to Theodore Roosevelt. And he was so good that William Howard Taft kept him on. He was like this military journalist guy from Georgia. Seems like everybody got along with him. And he really puts a human face on the drama and the turmoil and the rift between Roosevelt and Taft when, you know, Teddy came back and said, like, oh, I'm going to run again, even though you're my successor. We're going to compete. Because Butt was torn between these two guys. He was friends with them. He'd served them both, and he had to stay loyal to his president, Taft, at the time. But, I mean, you know, at one point, Teddy's daughter, Alice Roosevelt, who's a force of nature if there ever was one, she swings by like a femme fatale from a film noir, and she's like, Archie, Daddy wants you back. And this poor guy, he's like getting physically sick with the stress. Everybody's like, oh, you need a vacation. And finally he's like, all right, I'll take a vacation. And he goes with his roommate, artist, possible lover, Francis Millet. They go to Rome, they chill. It's time to come back home, gear up for the election of 1812. All right, they get on this ocean liner, the Titanic.
No.
And they both go down with the ship.
Wow.
So he's someone I'm fascinated with, also someone that I'm looking forward to getting to know more, because thank God his sister-in-law saved the Archie buttload of letters that he wrote to her, and they were published. And it really gives us a cool insider look at Roosevelt and Taft's time in office and the personalities there.
Solid answer.
Oh, thank you.
And I love figures like that, you know, they may not be the central character in most of the histories, but you start to see these connections. And then when you really turn the focus to them, you get such insight into what's going on. It's amazing. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those. I love the people that wrote stuff down, you know, like Margaret Bayard Smith. From her, we know so much about Jefferson and Madison and that administration, because she was just writing letters and documenting these things, and her, you know, big old crush on Jefferson and those types of things that you just love to read about.
And didn't frustratingly burn them.
Right?
All these people who burn their letters. Come on, people.
For shame.
Don't like that. Alicia.
Yes, sir.
You are a real official historian now, not like some amateur vigilante historian like me. How does that feel? And what did you gain from your master's program? And where do you see like the future of the profession going in a world where people can't even agree on what's happening in the present?
So first of all, thank you so much for considering me a historian. I think the imposter syndrome in me is always like, no, I'm not. I'm still not. But no, I think my graduate program was very good at teaching me that in order to understand the totality of something, breadth of research is just as important as your depth of research. So the thesis that I worked on was about welfare policies and was also like a gender and labor history. So I was looking at sociological studies. I was looking at, you know, political pundits. I was looking at historical, analysis. And I would not have been able to write all of what I wrote without each field contributing a good portion of information, a good new way of looking at analysis, right? Lots of stuff about public administration. That's not something that historians typically go for, right? So I think it definitely taught me about research. It taught me how to write in a different way. So much to the point where, like, even as I'm writing my podcast episodes now, like I was always very careful with what I said and how I said it, because like Kenny, I do like to try to be straight down the middle. I don't like to put presentism into any kind of episode that I do. But even now, when I'm writing an episode, I am I'm much more aware of like how are you introducing the story? What are the facts that are most important to telling the story? So it's definitely made the writing process a little bit longer, because I think I'm just that much more aware, that much more careful in what I say. And I still make mistakes from time to time. There's been a couple of episodes where I've had a dyslexic moment and I've said like 1838 and I meant, 1883. So, I digress. In terms of the future of the profession, oh God. I'm in a very cynic state of mind, if you haven't already caught on by now, or cynical state of mind. And so I have some fear about what it will mean to be a historian in not only in an era where we can't even agree that the sun is shining today, at least it is in California.
It's not shining here.
Oh.
So let alone we don't respect it feels we have this antipathy or this angst against intellectualism and intelligence and expertise. I don't know, because what is a historian? A historian is an expert of their specific view, right? Whether it's gender, labor, race, Reconstruction, whatever. If that isn't valued, and worse, if it's ridiculed, what do you do with that? There's no market for it, right? Saying nothing of the fact that who knows what's going to happen in terms of higher education, regular education. You know, there's a wish list of departments that want to be gutted, I guess, and Department of Education is one of them. So like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I think history and historians are going to have to become much more dynamic. They're going to have to get into the spaces that perhaps they've avoided to have those town square conversations, because I think the only way that the profession itself survives is by engaging with those that maybe perhaps they wouldn't engage with previously. Now, whether that's because they're in the ivory tower of an institution or I don't know, but I do think in order for the profession to survive, you have to get people that you wouldn't normally get, right? Like that's a part of the intent behind my podcast is I want to capture the people that maybe didn't think that they liked history. I keep them short, right? I get that people are really, really busy and they've got lots of things to do. And so if I can spark curiosity, if I can spark more questions, then I think I've done my job, and I've hopefully demonstrated that history can be fun and entertaining and engaging and informative and all of the things that I think it gets a bad rap for in your younger school years, right? So I'm a little cynical in this moment, but I think historians are going to really have to flip the script. They're going to have to do reality television. They're going to have to do something like so antithetical to who they are, just to demonstrate how important they are and the value that they bring to everybody, whether or not you like what they're telling you.
Now I'm picturing Dancing with Historians, and everybody has to dress as a historical character.
That would be wonderful. I just watched the Anna Kendrick movie last night. It's about the serial killer. And
the dating game one?
The dating game. So I'm anticipating like a historian's dating game, not the murder part.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
I'm dark. I'm not that dark.
You end up with a thesis, not murder.
There you go.
But you need that murder board when you're defending your thesis to practice and get shot.
There we go.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he's not wrong. There was a lot of like, okay, if this, then that, and if this, then that. And if they're going to ask this question, I need to be prepared to say this. And I still got questions, and I was like, I don't know. That's for future researchers. Okay. Anyway. Okay, so for me, I'm up next. I would say to Penny, you are a new parent. You introduced us to your little one before we started recording. So curious, which president are you going to teach her about first, and why?
Okay. So the very real answer to this question is the first book Aria was read was Lindsay Chervinsky's new book on the Adams administration.
Wow.
I absolutely read that to like a 1-month-old Aria as I was getting ready for that interview, and she didn't cry once. I think she was really into it.
Babies love the XYZ affair, you know.
They love it.
Love it.
They love it. Those letters are fun. And I love talking to her, so I've definitely already just told her stories from presidential history. I think the other night I was talking to her about John Quincy Adams and how everyone thought his career was over because he sucked as a president, but then he became a congressman, he became a big advocate against slavery, and you know, like, what's the moral of that story? And she's like, I don't know English yet, but
But she understands.
She understands. You know, she's getting the vibe. And so I think the answer is I'm always kind of talking to her about whatever from history or other lessons that are applicable. And whenever she starts to actually understand me, that'll happen to be the first president she hears about. And one other thought is in addition to like talking a lot from like telling a lot of history stories, I bring a lot of analogies from my background as a sports journalist. And one that I've been saying a lot lately, and this is a lesson that I'll probably try to teach her, and I think it's just something that feels grounding in my mind right now, is never get cocky in the first quarter, never despair in the second quarter, play every down like the score is 0-0, and remember that the scoreboard only lasts until the next game. So that's kind of the little Kenny homespun sports presidential political wisdom that I'll probably try to impart on her. Thank you for asking.
Of course.
I got one for Howard. Howard, this is the question that I think you need to be asked. If you were to write an Agatha Christie presidential history murder mystery where all past and present presidents were gathered in an isolated chateau only for a murderer to strike, which president is the detective? Who dies first and how? Who dies second and how? Who does everybody think did it, and who actually did it, and what was their motive?
No pressure.
Wow. Okay. So a little behind the scenes for the listeners. We did get these questions ahead of time, although I'd like to pretend I'm just riffing here. But this one required a little thought. So I'm going to stick with presidents that won't end up with the Secret Service visiting me when I talk about their murders. So the first victim, all right, 14th president, Franklin Pierce. Because you want a beautiful victim, right?
Beautiful Franklin. Gorgeous man.
This guy was dashing. So how does he die? Well, he falls from his balcony. Very sad. But everyone knows that he was depressed. His children had died. The last one super tragically in a train accident. His wife was basically withdrawn. So the rest of the presidents think, hey, maybe he jumped. You know, there's no reason to end this weekend party, right? But someone is suspicious, and it's John Adams. He's a brilliant, outspoken lawyer. He steps into the detective role, okay? Like Matlock, if he were from Boston instead of Mayberry. So you think, okay, John Adams is our protagonist here, you know? But nope. He's the next one to die.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh.
Poisoned hard cider. Yeah.
Ooh.
Ronald Reagan makes a joke that it was actually homicider.
Ba-dum-bum-bum.
Yeah. Who does everybody suspect? Two people. Andrew Jackson, because he can't stop talking about who he hates. And Lyndon B. Johnson, because he's intimidating as hell. But third victim, which you didn't ask about, but I promise I'll wrap up eventually, Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah. So this property they're staying at, the chateau, turns out there's a small exotic zoo there. And Teddy gets locked in with a lion. Yeah. Ironic, right? Tragic, messy.
Who's the last lion now, bitch?
Yeah. So who steps into the detective role, okay? Jimmy Carter.
Oh.
Yeah, because he basically is Matlock, right? Not the Kathy Bates one who, you know, that does look intriguing. I want to watch that. But no, I'm talking Andy Griffith. So Jimmy Carter, who's brilliant, right? He's a nuclear engineer. He finds something lodged in Franklin Pierce's throat, just like Silence of the Lambs. But it's not a moth. It's a golf ball.
Uh-oh.
Turns out that Pierce's death was an accident. William Howard Taft, okay? He's practicing his drives or, you know, whatever golfers do. The ball goes off course right into Pierce's mouth when he's on the balcony, and he goes over the edge.
I hate when that happens.
Yes. A little bit like a Seinfeld episode, but, you know. When John Adams starts to get close to the truth, that's when Taft took him out, okay? And then Taft finally got the opportunity to do what he came there to do in the first place, which was take out his old friend and now bitter enemy who cost him the election of 1912, Teddy Roosevelt. But he couldn't fool Jimmy Carter.
That wraps up so nicely, and I really hope someone's listening who can like make a book or a movie out of that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Start with some Chat GPT to get you like a structure and just write it.
I love it. So thank you for that question, by the way. And thank you for giving me half an hour to answer it.
But nobody would expect Taft.
Right? Nobody. Because
he looks so lovable.
Yeah.
And then I see, like, when it's finally revealed, it just kind of gets a little darker, and you finally get that look, and you see the crazed look in his eye. It's like, oh, Taft goes dark.
Because his smile's already like something out of Smile,
Yeah.
And you're not gonna think, oh, who's gonna sneak up on you, Taft? Oh, no. He could do it. Okay, Jerry, you've immersed yourself in the first few decades of the United States. So let's say I have a time machine that would take me back to that period. What advice would you give me on how to fit in, what not to do, and especially what I can do to succeed and rise to the role of the president, or at least a cabinet member?
Okay, so first, go ahead and bring some antibiotics and like anything you need to stay healthy, but to not give it away that you're from the future. You're just going to have to pretend to be sick like half the time. But good news, you can just say, "Oh, no, I've got something. I'm coming down with something. I'm just going to stay in bed all day. Sorry. And I'm probably going to have to drink a lot of alcohol because, that was the solution to all the problems. But don't let them bleed you. Don't let them bleed you. Please, no.
You need to embroider that on a pillow.
If they start talking about bleeding, cupping, just stay away. Don't go to the doctor. Also, don't pick a fight with Andrew Jackson.
Smart.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and make sure that beforehand where Andrew Jackson is at any given time.
Yep.
And just stay like 3 states away from him. You'll be fine.
Nice.
Now, in terms of becoming a cabinet member or a president, so cabinet member, you're probably going to want to be a lawyer, and you're definitely going to want to be wealthy. Now, to be a president at this time, the pre-Jacksonian era, you're going to need to be from Virginia. So if you can figure out how to be a wealthy lawyer from Virginia, you might have a shot.
Easy.
I've got one more piece of advice for you, Howard.
Yes.
To amass the fortune you'll need to do this, because you do need to be individually wealthy, you should travel back in time with a 1796 political almanac and make a fortune betting on political races around the country.
There you go.
That's a little Back to the Future reference.
Yeah, gotta get my buggy going 88 miles per hour, and we'll be good to
go. And definitely don't sign up for any schemes with Aaron Burr, because those didn't work out so well.
I like it. If I have a time machine, I feel like I could also be from Virginia and a lawyer. I could fake that. I think we're good.
Yeah, you can make it work.
I'll let you know.
If we start to see history changing, we'll know Howard went back and we're going to change this.
I mean, I have some notes if you are really going back in time. Just a heads up, just talk to me before you go do that. Okay.
Done.
Well, last but certainly not least, I have a question for Kenny. Kenny, as you're getting close to reaching the present day in your journey through U.S. presidential history, which is a problem that I won't have for quite some time now, do you feel that your approach to folks who are still making news is going to differ from those who have been long gone? And what happens for you podcast-wise once you catch up with the present day? And again, I'm thankful that I don't have to think about this for many decades in the future.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jerry. I think the first thing that I've just started to run into is when we talk about the very recent presidents, I'm struggling to find good, succinct biographies or books about their administrations. For example, I've been looking for something good to read on Obama, And I'm really struggling to find like a good, concise, like the Obama administration or the Obama biography. Even his memoir only covers like the first half of his presidency. I like cracked it open and start reading it, and I was like, wait, this like, does this end when they kill bin Laden? Spoilers. Like where? Like it doesn't have his full term. So that has been a struggle. And then, as I get to Trump part 1 and Biden, I'm thinking, okay, I might have to rethink how I do my research. On one hand, these are all things I lived through. So, I mean, of course, I have my memory, but that doesn't feel like the best way to put together an episode. I want to find more sources. I want to find more perspective. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting things. So that is definitely something I'm looking at.
So Kenny, just real quick, because I know you still have several parts of the question to answer, but have you looked at journalists? So in speaking, kind of part of the grad program, we were talking about like, what is the best way to research and grasp and analyze the recent past, because historians are known for waiting 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And most of that's because, especially when it comes to politics, right, there's a lot of stuff that's like still sealed as confidential. But one of my professors, in fact, my thesis advisor, said, well, when you're looking at the recent past, what you'll find typically is journalists come out first. And it's very succinct. It's very clear. It's very kind of facts, ma'am. Nothing but the facts, ma'am. And then he's like, and then you'll start to see like insiders writing memoirs. Right. And then finally the historians get to it. So I'm sure you've probably looked at it, but just in case you haven't, I figured I'd give you a heads
I appreciate that tip. I'll dig more into it. And, one of the things I've noticed, for example, was it Bob Woodward, one of the first journalists you think of. He writes his books, but they're about very specific parts of the presidency, like Obama's wars. Okay, great. That's Obama's wars. What about, and it came out like 3 years into his administration. So, I'm definitely like looking under all the stones, but I'm going to do a double check into that. And it also, honestly, it might mean just reading more news stories or summaries, from the end of president administrations as well, when journalists are kind of doing their recaps. So we'll see how I do that recent stuff. The other things I'll do is with some of these more modern presidents, and I think I've started to hit this in some of my episodes I've released, is if I've encountered them in any way or have any kind of connection to them, I'll put that at the top of the episode. Like Bush Sr., the presidential library was at my alma mater. I've seen him at sporting events, things like that. So that's another thing that I will throw in there. Yeah, so that's what I got. Thanks for the question, Jerry. And Absolutely. That wraps up our questions for each other, our round table. So before I let you guys go, I thought this was a really fun conversation, but I want to end on as positive a note as we can. So really do give me, what is something that you will be thankful for this year? And after that, I'll ask you where everybody who listened can find your podcast so people can tune in and hear more from you. I mentioned mine at the top. I'm very thankful for my 4-month-old daughter and seeing her meet friends and family and people I care about. Those interactions always just make my day. So that is the thing I am thankful for this year. Jerry, you're next on my screen, so I'm just going to throw it to you. What is something that you're going to be thankful for this year?
Absolutely. For me, it's been a busy year. There's been a lot going on personally. There's a lot that's been going on with the podcast. It's all been exciting, challenging, scary, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like it's getting me to a new place. I'm looking and reflecting back on where I was this time last year, and I feel like personally I'm more capable of handling things than I was a year ago. And it's always nice to be able to say that. We are, of course, facing some challenging times ahead. So that's, I'm glad I'm feeling this way. But also just in terms of podcasting, January will mark 8 years of the Presidency's podcast.
Congratulations.
I will finally be finishing up the epic that is the Madison presidency and moving forward. So that's always an exciting place. And I'm always so grateful and thankful for the folks who listen, for fellow podcasters, and for those folks in my non-podcasting world who are so supportive and help me to keep going with this work. So I'm so thankful for that. For those of you who haven't checked out Presidencies yet, the website is presidenciespodcast.com. You can search for the Presidencies of the United States wherever you get your podcast. And I hope you'll join this journey with me. I am going to be 8 years in, and there's no stopping us now. We've got the Monroe presidency coming up. And even though folks don't think too much about the Monroe presidency, believe me, there's more going on than you may imagine at the beginning. So thank you.
Alicia, what's something you're thankful for this year?
Shout out to my husband. I think it's been a whirlwind for the last several years, just between grad school and working full time, and him kind of taking on a lion's share of just domestic stuff to make sure the house still stays standing. So, and he's been wonderful this last few days. Made sure I got out and moved my body and got to be in nature and kind of grounding me as much as he possibly can. So shout out to my husband. Love ya. My community. And when I say community, I mean my friends, the people, the podcast community, just knowing that we're going to need each other, I think more so than ever before. I'm very grateful that I have some very strong, intelligent, capable, thoughtful human beings in my life, present company included. I'm also very thankful for historians. I have been, I always will be. I think they are going to do God's work over the next few years. And I really hope people pay attention to what they have to say. Their perspective matters and comes from years and years of research. Mm-hmm. And they don't predict the future. They're actually, most historians will balk at any kind of semblance of guessing at the future, but they will inform us about the past and how similar situations have gone before.
Well,
and so for those who are looking for me, I'm at Civics and Coffee. So civicsandcoffee.com. I release episodes every weekend, every Saturday. And like I've said before, my plug is always history and the time it takes you to drink a cup of coffee. So I try to keep things short and sweet and to the point. The only time I break for that is if I have a historian or a scholar that I'm interviewing, because I want to give them, as much time as possible to promote their work. So come find me. I am on most of the socials. Will probably be more particular about where I'm at in terms of my presence moving forward into 2025. But civicsandcoffee.com is probably the best way to find me and figure out where you can follow the show.
Thank you. And Howard, what are you thankful for this year and where can we find you?
I'm thankful for my wife and co-host Jess. As always, and my family. Our two kiddos are in school together for the first time, one in kindergarten, one in fourth grade. And that's just, great. I'm thankful that they have awesome teachers who are just really fostering their love of knowledge. And yeah, I'm thankful for the Merlin Bird ID app. No one's paying me to say that, but it's this app. It's basically Shazam for birds. I can go outside and I hear birds and I'm like, what kind of bird is that? It's really annoying. And it's always a mockingbird. But lately it's been ravens. We have a lot of ravens around us. I don't know that I'm thankful for them because I feel like they're gunning for me, but it's just cool to be connected to nature in some kind of way. And I'm thankful for our listeners, the folks that sometimes reach out and say what the podcast means to them or, what value they found in it. That's always so rewarding and just really incredible to hear. And we are plotting through the presidents. You can find us at plodpod.com or on Facebook, where I try not to argue with commenters. But we bi-weekly episodes we release. We might be moving to weekly at some point next year to bring you even more content. So give us a listen and
Awesome. And my podcast, Abridged Presidential Histories, you can find it on any podcast listening platform under that name. Each episode, as they mentioned, have been going in order from Washington to present day. Each president, their successes, scandals, and setbacks in an hour or less. plus historian interviews to do deeper dives into what doesn't quite get into the main episodes. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This was really fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you give all of these folks a listen and check out their podcasts. And just a quick reminder, whether this past election turned out the way you wanted or not, then if you are at all a consumer of political news, remember, never get cocky in the first quarter, never despair in the second quarter, play every down like it's 0-0, and scoreboard only lasts until the next game. So thanks, everybody. Take care. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Abridged Presidential Histories. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, tell your friends and family about the show, and write a 5-star review on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you'd like to support the show, you can look it up on Patreon or go directly to www.patreon.com/abridgedpresidentialhistories. This helps me buy books and pay to host the show, and thank you so much to everyone who's contributed so far. The music in today's podcast is a public domain recording of the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. In our next episode, what would you do if, while running for office, every skeleton in your closet came spilling out one after another? Your deepest shames revealed for the world to see and judge. Would you pack it up, tuck tail, and go home? Or would you fight? Bill Clinton chose to fight every step of the way, and somehow he kept on winning. It's Bill Clinton time, up next on Abridged Presidential Histories.